Okay, we are at the Clinton County Historical Association room, the presentation room, and I had always heard that Allen Everest was irreplaceable, but I found out that you replaced him.
I did. As I was saying, we had three retirements in the department in '83 and '84
At Plattsburgh State.
at Plattsburgh State, and so three folks came in. The newbies came in, and so Altina Waller and myself handled kind of what Alan used to teach. But Alan used to come to the department regularly and have coffee with the older gentlemen, and just we talked. And so we both were again interested in historic preservation. He had a very local angle since he was the local historian, and I had more of an architectural, social, cultural angle. So we kind of melded our strengths and appreciated our weaknesses.
So much of what we know about a lot of subjects, history in our area, we owe to Dr. Allen Everest. But your name is?
Jim Lindgren. I came in 1984, and I retired in 2021. So I've been safely ensconced in retirement for 3.5 years now.
Okay, and you're retired, but you're not just sitting around doing nothing, are you?
No, I'm doing presentations, but I work on topics related to historic preservation. So I published 4 books on preservation already, and I've started another one, and I'm just seeing if I can get access to the archives because the federal government has closed off many of the opportunities that I had expected to.
Oh, really?
Yeah, budget cuts and again limited hours for the National Park Service and difficulties along those lines.
So these are national archives you're talking about?
Yeah, it's out in San Francisco. So we're 3,000 miles from San Francisco here in Plattsburgh. It's a long walk, and it's an expensive place to stay while I do research. So as I said on my webpage, stay tuned, news at 11. If I might be lost at sea or I might find a safe port.
So that's something that you're hoping to do, but you've done some research, and tonight you're going to be talking about our missing architectural roots, it says on that screen.
That's right. Again, a good preservationist always tries to know the local community. So since I've been here over 40 years now, that's what I am trying to, again, still further is my understanding of how Plattsburgh developed.
And I got the gist that you're going to be talking about a lot of structures that aren't here anymore. Is that correct?
Mostly I'm talking about what's gone. That's right. And so that's why when we think about what's here, it's important, but we more importantly need to remember what was lost and why it was lost, because as Alan would tell us, we have to be very mindful of how the city is developing day by day into the future.
Did you ever get the opportunity to meet a fellow named Ron Venn? Ron used to do then and now photos. He would take a photo of that existed, it was taken 100 years ago or 50 years ago, and then go back to that same location and take a picture now. And so he did a lot of then and now. I think Gordy Little and I did
Times change.
a dozen shows with him.
Okay, yeah, there's cities are living, and so whether they are living prosperously or living on a day-to-day survival basis, it's up to us to watch and intervene.
Okay, well, you're about a minute away from getting to work, so we won't hold you up. We appreciate you chatting with us.
Sounds good, thank you.
Thank you.
Ready to start.
Does that mean I'm ready to?
Yes. I will.
Good evening, good evening. Thanks for coming out tonight. The program, as you can see on the title page, is about what's missing in Plattsburgh's architectural history. So, as I was saying a few minutes ago, I came to Plattsburgh in '84 with my wife, and we came up from Virginia, where I had just received my PhD from College of William and Mary. And I worked in preservation before, as did my wife. And one of the cardinal rules of a good preservationist is that you learn the history of the community. You know the context, because you don't want to kind of force yourself into a situation which is, again, not known to you. So I've been studying Plattsburgh history for years and presenting programs to my students. I taught historic preservation for almost 40 years up here. And I taught historic sites, I've taught history museums, so I'm a public historian. So what you're going to hear from me tonight is the perspective of a practicing historian as well as an academic historian. I write about history and I teach it, and I enjoy it thoroughly. I hope that comes across to you. So the program, as you can see, is called Lost Plattsburgh. And I will start with, again, obviously where it all began. And so when you think about Plattsburgh, the first buildings just aren't here anymore. And that's pretty typical for a city's transition as it goes through economic development. So if you go on Bridge Street at Green Street, or you go on Hamilton, you will see these signs, and they were put up back in the 1930s. And so we don't know much about what these buildings look like, but there is a speculative portrait of Zephaniah Platt's home. And as I say, it's all conjectural. And so this again was printed in the souvenir edition of the 1897 Daily Press. And so this is a pretty substantial building for the man who just came up. He received over 30,000 acres from the state, acres that had been largely confiscated from, again, de Friedenberg. De Friedenberg was on the wrong side during the Revolution, so his land was taken. Most of it was given to Platt and his, again, colleagues. And so Platt came up from Dutchess County, brought along his slaves, so he introduced slavery to what will become Clinton County. And that's what we go by. So what we're seeing is a fairly substantial house, supposedly from 1799. Closer to the time period is a house, again, a tenement. Now, the word tenement, it's got pejorative connotations to it. It's really an apartment house of the era. So what you see is a 4-unit dwelling, and up top you can see the lofts where people slept. Down below was at least a hall and a parlor, kitchen. And so this was, as you can see, it's on the site where the Plattsburgh Fire Department would be built. It was pretty simple, again, plain, coarse limestone foundation, very rudimentary, but it still survived up until, for almost 125 or so years. Now this is to be contrasted with, again, a more regal house was built right after the War of 1812, and that's the house on your left there, you see, built by Samuel Lowell. As you probably heard the story before, again, Mrs. Lowell had, again, come across a load of British gold. She walked away with it. Stole it, yes. She walked away with it, and that's what was used to build this house. Pretty regal. When you think about it, it's an early federal structure. You can see most of the decoration along the front door, the portico there. You can see, again, a little balustrade above the door, the entry, a nice decorative treatment at the door itself. The other decoration is all the way on the top, a hipped roof, very mildly pitched, and up top is a cupola, like you'd see maybe on New England homes along the shore. The widow's watch, as they used to call them, looking out to sea. Here you could look out to Lake Champlain. Now you wouldn't see the whales that you'd see in New Bedford, but you might see Champy back in those days too, so you had no documentation of that. But the house survived, and it survived because it was bought by Shepherd Bowen. And he, after the Civil War, remodeled it. So somewhere in the house is the incorporated features of this. Shepherd Bowen's house, again, twice to come, I think is one of the nicest in the city, without a doubt. Very regal. It kind of fits into what Sinclair Lewis was describing about end of the 19th, early 20th century Gilded Age. People who lived regally, people who had their hands, as Bowen did, in banking, in iron, in, again, forestry products, people who were, again, played the political game well. So Shepherd Bowen's house is one where you can see, again, that dominant tower there is built in the style of an Italian villa, but it comes after the Civil War, so that's why you have these French modifications. Mostly it's a mansard roof. Look at the tower's roof, it caves in, it's a concave roof. Got very nice treatment along the roof line with a cornice all across the building. It is very stylishly decorated. And on the east side, as you probably know, is again the chapel where William Rogers Hunt again had designed some murals. So this kind of represents the Gilded Age of Plattsburgh. And I think it's still, as I mentioned, one of the nicest houses, if not the nicest ones in the city. Now, that's to be contrasted with another federal building. This is gone. This was built by John White, but it's most associated with Smith Weed. You think of all the power players in Plattsburgh in the course of our history. Smith Weed was at the top of it. Again, Loyal Smith contributed much to the city. Ron Stafford, another power player, but Smith Weed was one who, during his lifetime, made sure that he contributed to the city, and his property, as it developed, would go on to become, again, a social organization for the home of the friendless, a charitable organization taking care of waifs and orphans. But it's a federal design. You can see mostly the federal features right there at the entry. See the recessed entry. It's sided by small, thin columns. It's topped by a semi-elliptical transom. It's got those mountains, like a spider's web coming up. Again, a sign of, again, good taste of the era. It's also got, again, if you look at the first floor, it's got 12 over 12 windows, a lot of window panes, and those had lasted up until the time this picture was taken at the close of the 19th century. As it says in the script there, as real estate would always tell us, what's the realtor's mantra? Location, location, location. And the location was what the city wanted for what will be the new high school. So that's going to be replaced in the, later. I'll talk about how other schools have impinged on other buildings. So this is a federal era, as is the first of the academies in Plattsburgh. Now this is a more simple building. It's clapboard, clapboard, down Virginia we say clapboard. But if you think of the clapboard, it's again relatively simple, but that's why eventually it's going to burn so easily, as you would see in 1871. Its federal features are principally that Palladian window. Palladio was a 16th century Italian designer, and this piece of window here, again with that round arch center, is very typical of how Palladian windows during the Georgian era, the federal era, and subsequent eras would be designed. This was a tuition-based school, so it wasn't a free school, but you can see the kids out front, and I guess they were all drawn to classes because at the very top of the building, what do you see? A bell, and some kid gets to climb up there and ring it to inaugurate the day. I hope he got down safely. Okay? So this is federal architecture too, again, long gone. The federal era was also shown by the first church, the first, again, formal church in town. That's the Presbyterians. It was built during the War of 1812. And the federal features are going to be seen largely, as I say it in the script, in the Ionic volutes. Ionic columns, again, the Greeks and the Romans both had, again, 3 established classical orders. And you can see the columns in the bottom right. You got these 4 kind of scrolls. Those are Roman volutes or scrolls atop the column. Also, again, the feature for the federal is, again, in the tympanum. You see the gable, you see that little window in the gable there? Okay, it's called the tympanum, but you've got a window there, which is also characteristic of the federal. And the corner of the buildings, you've got coins, which originally served the practical purpose of holding the building together, but in this case, it's mostly stylistic. So the Presbyterian Church, or again, the Smith Weed House, all these are, again, federal era. Now, the only building really kind of at the same time, and coming from Virginia in the South, we see much more of these down there. It's rare up here. We call it Jeffersonian classicism down there, or it's a Roman revival. This was built, as you can see in the script too, it's at the corner of Oak and Brinkerhoff, and we know it's going to be coming there. It's going to be the school and then the library. And so its location, excuse me, the YMC and the library is going to be there. It's going to be the location which is most important. But it's Jeffersonian because of, in some ways, it repeats what Jefferson learned when he was minister to France in the 1780s. So he studied architecture there, brought back pieces that he incorporated into the capital of Virginia and other buildings. And in Plattsburgh, which was a Republican town here on the frontier, again, it was again copied by Captain Sidney Smith as he and his father built his house. Now, President Monroe, as you see, came here after the War of 1812. This was a supposed era of good feelings, as historians call it, an era when there was less partisanship, unlike, I suppose, today. But the building didn't last, partly because, as you can see, it's wood. Wood structures don't last nearly as long. And even when this picture was taken, it seems to be in slight disrepair. Its location is what's most important. But it's Roman in style, and it goes back to Jefferson's principles. You see that along the cornice line. You see those decorations, again, and the frieze line, as they call it. Again, they're tribus. There's 3 lines coming down. It's, again, a classical feature which is often appended to a building as a piece of decoration. What challenged the Roman revival and was really dominant in Plattsburgh was the Greek revival. We've got a lot of Greek revival if you go down Court Street or Brinkerhouse Street, if you go into the Point District. So they've survived. Now, I chose two that didn't survive. And we can't expect all to survive, but one, as you can see on the left, again, was Greek revival. It's got a little doctor's office appended to the side there. Very common for lawyers or doctors to have a side entrance where they can practice and live right adjacent to it. The building on the left, you can see, it's got a raised platform, so it's got a raised basement. But its Greek features are largely around the entryway again. That's where this, again, the classical features are shown. So it's got a flat transom or a window above the door. It's got side lights on the side of the door. It allows light to get into the entryway just so you could have, again, more of a homey feeling there. The building on the right was demolished in the 50s, as it says there. It's another Greek revival structure. Got a very classical cornice line along the front. You can't see from the picture, these are old pictures that I've copied. Can't see, but there's, again, pilasters, kind of a flat column at the side of the buildings too. Again, it's a classical feature just to give some sense of dignity to the structure. The building on the right, the Taro House, shared a lot with 26, and again, 26 Broad Street, and as, again, Alan Evers would say, it was disappointingly replaced by okay, you got the story, I think, there. So when Alan wrote his book on our North Country heritage, he was so disillusioned with what was going on, particularly on Broad Street. And this was an example that he would often bring to, again, conversations. It's just Plattsburgh was losing its sense of character. Now, Greek revival is also, again, as you go closer to downtown, and so this house here at 40 Court Street is very typical of urban houses because it at first was a residence, for a family, and then the rector at Trinity Church. And then, as again populations moved, it became, as you can see on the left, it became an office. WEAV radio was operated there. Okay. Now that didn't make enough money for whoever owned it, and so what it became was a commercial structure. Now these storefronts were very typical. I wrote a book about Boston. Some of the finest houses in Boston had storefronts like this appended to them. Fortunately, you can take them off if you restore them. This building didn't make it because it was on the location that the county desired. As you can see, it's where the cars now park for the government center there. Okay. Now, before the Civil War, one style that was almost directly opposite of the Greek revival was the Gothic revival, the Romantic revival. We had the Romanesque revival and the Gothic. Now, the Greek was seen as too formal, too rigid, too enclosed, too, again, restraining. The Gothic, on the other hand, was supposed to open up the countryside, open up the landscape, be more natural, be more lively. And again, the house that Alan lived in for long years was typical of that. And like the Gothic too, if you look at the form, particularly from up top, it's in the form of a cross, a cruciform pattern. And those Gothic features are further shown too. You can see, sorry. I was telling how I got a fat finger when it comes to these gizmos here. You can see a little Gothic arch repeated here, so there's a Gothic arcade right there. Up top, on the top of each of these dormers, you've got a little spire, a little pinnacle. You've got, again, tracery cut into, these are quatrefoils, they're 4 low foils, characteristic of Gothic buildings too. And you've got other stylistic forms too, typical for the era. Here you've got a cantilever, there's, again, it's built into the building, a cantilevered bay window. Here again you've got, again, columns which reflect the new technology of the day. Again, new types of saws were able to bevel a post, chamfer they call it. And that gave a nice form, a nice silhouette to it. So Alan's house was, again, an excellent example of the rural Gothic revival. Now, when I came to town in the middle 1980s, there were 3 or 4 pretty nice Gothic revivals. Al was the only one to survive, it's the only one, and it's now gone. We don't have any decent Gothic revival of the pre-Civil War, Civil War era left in town. Now, the government buildings that Plattsburgh had, as you can see on the left, we've got the Custom House, being so close to the border, this is natural. This was chosen for Renaissance revival. Very formal, very stately, very impressive, and that's what the government, again, wanted to picture itself. With the Renaissance revival, and you think, the President's House in Washington, again, that's Renaissance revival. It's often chosen for government forms. But with the Renaissance revival, what you have is, again, each floor is separated by, again, a belt course. The second floor seems to be the most prominent. That's very typical. Very stately, very formal, somewhat rigid, but that was, again, the choice for what became the government with the post office and the custom house. Now, close nearby down the street, obviously, is the original county courthouse, which tragically burned. Now, this is federal also mostly because what you see here is, again, this treatment, this void. See how these windows are recessed? That was very typical. If you go to Boston, you go, again, sections of Boston, you'll see this common in the federal buildings. Square, cubicle, a nice prominent, again, cornice line there. Top by an octagonal tower or cupola with a copper dome. Again, the Clinton County Courthouse was, again, a very stately building for being so far from the center of power in New York State. Before the Civil War, but mostly after the 50s, 60s, 70s, the Italianate was, again, the dominant form in Plattsburgh. And no better example could be found than what Samuel Vilas built at the court of Catherine and Brinkerhoff. Vilas came from Vermont, quickly established himself, business, banking, the Vilas National Bank, today we remember the Vilas Home, for example. And this structure is, we call it Italianate. There's a variety of Italian forms. There's Venice, there's Lombardy, and so forth. But this one is a compilation. And what's typical of the Italianate form was that they're cubical buildings. Okay, so it's a form of a cube. It's got an overhanging roof, and you can see here double brackets. Okay, double brackets. It's got again a monitor up top, or again to kind of see out into the countryside, see the lake or so forth, a cupola. Typical too were the entry points. Now this is a very similar type of portico that Allen had on his house. This is almost Moorish in style. But what you have is very tall, narrow windows, topped by, again, a stylized cornice line there. Very typical for Italianate of the era, whether it's in Chicago, San Francisco, Philadelphia, Boston. You'll find them all over the place, and Plattsburgh has its share. This, as we probably know, this house no longer there, but I'm told it's been incorporated into, again, the building that now occupies the site, again, which is a senior center home. I don't know, I've never seen how it's there, but I was told that pieces of the original building were included in Mount Assumption Institute and the later senior home there. Before and after the Civil War, another style which was prominent was the Second Empire. It goes back to France. Louis Napoleon was the grandson of Napoleon the Great. Louis Napoleon became Napoleon III. He's the one who rebuilt Paris, Baron Hauptmann. And this was a style that the French had adopted as their own. In the US, sometimes it's paradoxically called the General Grant style because he was present when this was popular. But we have it in Plattsburgh, and you can see here the academy. This, again, took the site of the first academy that had burned to the ground. Remember, the arsonists had done the work there. And so this is the Second Empire there. This is the Second Empire to the William Wallace Hartwell House on the corner of Broad and Ruger Street. But if you think of the French Empire here, it's very stately, very refined, very, formal. And that's how education was thought and expected to be. Now with the Second Empire here, you've got a pavilion here. So we've got advancing planes coming out of the south and the north sides. The center is recessed, and you've got a nice formal entry there. Rises up 3 floors. Each of the floors is separated by a belt course there, limestone. The window treatment, if you think, all this red brick, and the corbel line here, the fancy corbel, the brickwork of the mason. Each of these windows has got a nice limestone surround. It goes up, up, and up, all the way to the roof line, where again, you've got this fancy cornice with double brackets, and then the mansard roof. Now, the mansard roof was chosen in France because it makes that top floor more livable. And typically with American cities, the top floor will be occupied by servants or, again, mothers-in-law or something of that sort. But what you have is, here the top floor is going to be, again, very practical space used for largely, again, logistical functions associated with the school. The Second Empire also has this tower rising up. Again, you can see, again, the slope. The tower is topped by kind of a little fencing, it's called cresting. It's sided by curbing there. So it's nice, the sides, the angles are nicely demarcated there. So the Second Empire, very formal, nice local use of brick masonry. Again, all the local limestone, again, coarse limestone at the bottom. So the Academy of 1871, again, was a credit to Plattsburgh. Not too far away, as I mentioned, at the corner of Broad and Rupert, was W.W. Hartwell's house. He was another Vermonter. He came and got his hand into everything that was a moneymaker of the day. So when it came down to the iron ore along the Saranac, he partnered with Smith Reed. When it came to, again, forestry products, he had, again, mills down towards the river in Plattsburgh. He had gristmill in town, he had hardware business, he had his hand into everything. And so he chose what was a very formal house here. You can see this is frame. He actually bought a house and rebuilt it, or remodeled it in the French Empire style. And the features are, again, pretty much the same. Double brackets, tall tower, topped by a mansard roof. You get nice decorated windows, a lot of windows. So it's really French. He even has, it looks like an Alsatian shepherd guarding the front door. Oh, door-to-door salesman, please, I guess he's saying. But this house, though it was a credit to the city and, again, one of the mansions of the era, this house had a bad location as well, because what's going to happen is it's demolished for a gas station. Now, just look at the location, because that's what I want to show. Here's his house, okay? Here's Ruger Street. Here's Broad Street. Here's a trolley coming up from William Street. Here's a trolley. And so this is a location, and you think a location for cars. Cars are going to, well, they're going to ruin cities. And we've become dependent upon them, but they change the whole nature of cities, whether it's Boston, about which I write, or cities across the East Coast, West Coast, and so forth. And so here you can see the gas station. You see here's Ruger, here's Broad. There's still this little patch of green here. And what did the college do with it after the gas station went? If you know, what?
Parking lot.
Well, there is a parking lot, because Kehoe's going here, a parking lot. But this is where the patch of green still exists, and the college put these stone structures. I always call it, I told my students, it was Stonehenge 1 or 2. Okay. Those stone structures there, but it's a really odd fit, but you can see that.
That's where I grew up, in the middle of that parking lot.
Did you?
It was on the end of Beaton Street.
I'll be talking about your neighborhood in a few minutes, okay? But you know, this is how the city's developing. So you can see the college buildings developing along Ruger Street, going out to Broad Street. So this is the way it happened, okay? So again, the gas stations and cars come in. Now, on Broad Street, right across the street, you've got other houses. I call them Victorian eclectic. You know, some have called them Second Empire. It's really not a Second Empire, though. It does have a mansard roof to each of these. This is the same building. I include 2 shots of the same building because it's nice to see how a good color job would accent the building, accent the lines, both vertical and horizontal. And so this house, again, became a sorority, okay? And it was owned by the college, but it's got a real steep gable roof topped by a pinnacle here. It's got that very slender, tall tower topped by a mansard, again, squared, sloping mansard. It's got those typical porches, as we said, with the Victorian era. So it is one where you can see there was wealth and culture and establishment there, but it unfortunately was in the way again of those who wanted the land for different pursuits, because it's going to be replaced by, okay? Yeah, I have to be careful what I say sometimes, because I said this to one of my students at one time. She lived there. It was home to her. So it's the prejudice that I may show when I think about how architecture and culture should be given more priority than others want to give it. But this is what happened to Broad Street up and down the block. Okay? Now, Victorian Eclectic is also going to be seen in one of the fanciest and nicest, my most favorite of the demolished ones in town, and this is the Edwards House. Edwards was a lawyer, a banker, a developer. He was even water commissioner for a long time. And his house kind of resembles, if you think about it, it resembles, well, look at the steep roof here, and particularly how it's designed. It's Dutch. It's got a curvilinear design. And it's got this stone treatment going up, holding the roof. That's a parapet. The tower, again, a very tall tower, topped by another spire or pinnacle. Magnificent porch there. Stone construction. You can see it here in maybe in better ways. You can see a trefoil, 3 foils, 3 leaves, a trefoil there. Again, medallion window up here, the tall tower. Again, a mansion. You could only call it a mansion for someone who took pride in the accomplishments that he had won. Now, as it says, the land was what was more important, so it was purchased by St. John's, as St. John's Academy was developing. The sisters lived there. It was demolished in '56. Now, Edwards got out of there beforehand. I'm not sure of the story. I've been looking this up, but he lived here at 59 Broad, but with the Depression, he moved across the street to a more humble house that was owned by his daughter. And so I kind of think this house was probably too expensive to maintain, which is understandable, particularly during the Depression. So some of these houses, his general rule is they require maintenance. When I did my book on South Street Seaport, I interviewed Pete Seeger, and he gave me this line from Eric Hoffer. He says, maintenance is 99% of civilization. You really got to maintain these buildings. And so that's where it takes the money to do it. And so this building, unfortunately, the land was more important, and that's what happened there. Now I show you again, this is Sanborn's insurance map from 1902, but here's where Edwards lived. Here's Cemetery Street, okay, so that's again where Riverside Cemetery is. So he had a gigantic lot. All these lots are again where mansions are going to be occupied. I'm going to show you the Conway House in a few minutes, okay, so soon he's going to be at fault for construction there. But we're looking at, again, this convergence of Ruger and Broad Street, and these houses are pretty much doomed by the expansion, not only of the campus, but again, St. John's Academy, the expansion of how Plattsburgh is developing during the time period. Now, if you go further out, again, you can see the other mansions in town, and I'm going to talk briefly about these. And so, this is again up the hill, kind of where Kinney's Drug is now, or where Wiry radio station used to be. Okay? So one is again the Merritt Saul's house. Saul's had a hardware business. He was a Vermonter also. He built a house, again, very high Victorian style. The drawing here does it more justice than this poor photo, but you think of the lands that he had, the commanding view that he had. What we still have is that gigantic tower, topped by a spire, topped by a massive roof, big, tall windows, stylish era porch, and so forth. Very typical for the era. Now, this house lasted until the 30s or 40s because, as I read, it became a restaurant for a while on top of the hill. It was just very expensive to maintain, and whoever owned it didn't choose to do that. Next door was again Soma Linda by Ebenezer Winslow. And this house is one that is now where the apartment house is, right next to Kinney Drug and so forth. And it's, again, what you think of it, the towers, the tall windows, the stylish decoration around the windows and door, very, very typical of the Victorian era. Now, this house is going to become controversial because it's going to set off a preservation campaign. Now, Alan Everett's book of 1972 is going to get a lot of people thinking, and Frank Arvey's demolition of Soma Linda is going to get more people thinking, including Clinton County Historical, okay? And so Frank Arvey was a Hungarian-born, him and his brother Jim, they were both architects that came to town from Canada. They want to make money on real estate, and that's their plan. Now, I'm going to go into Frank Arvey's plans for the downtown block that has been so much a subject of controversy, but he's the one who raised the idea in the 70s. His plan to build a Ramada in there and stores. And we're still dealing with the aftermath of that proposal there. But Frank Arvey, again, was determined to, again, take the site. He built the apartment complex there, and it shocked a lot of folks in the community. What survived after was the carriage house. And you can see originally the carriage house had a wing on it. I'm not sure when that wing came down, but for years I drove by this. I took my camera out and took pictures. The carriage house was just in disarray, disarray, disarray. It almost like it's going to fall right into the dumpster right there. All right? But eventually it came down because it was unsightly and unsafe. And it was a preservation story that had gone sour. Here's Turner Heights today. So here's again, see what this is. Here's Stewart's, here's Kinney's, and here's the apartment house that Frank Arvey built. And so here you can see again Corneta coming down and so forth. So you can just see how the town, the city has developed around this area. Now, the Victorian era is also known for churches, and so when you think about the High Victorians, the Methodist Church at the foot of Oak and Clinton Street is shown here on the left. It's, oops, like that finger again. Shown here on the left, it's Victorian Romanesque. Okay, Romanesque is, again, you see, particularly what makes it Romanesque, you can see this arcade in here, arch, 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 arch. You combine arches together, you've got an arcade. The wheel window, the rose window, that's a feature of Romanesque architecture. The tower, the tall tower with the columns, again, very, again, Romanesque for its era. It was demolished, as you can see, in the 1970s. That's when the Methodists moved over to their current building now. Right down the street was a Baptist church built in the Gothic style. You see the Gothic windows here, pointed arches, pointed arches, pointed arches. Again, tall, steep, again, all very Gothic. A simple building, but it burned, and again, it was replaced by the kind of the colonial style building that we still see today on Oak Street. So the churches also had high Victorian buildings. Probably the most close to me, since it was my employer for so many years, was Plattsburgh. Plattsburgh, the normal school, which became Plattsburgh Teaching College, which became University College, which became the SUNY that we know today. And so the very impressive building shown here, and the very impressive building you see here, again, we still got the pond there. I'm sure these kids have grown older over the years. Okay. Very impressive pond there. And it was typical of, again, a lot of the outlying counties where there were so many immigrants. Clinton County had a load of French, particularly after the agricultural crisis of the 1830s in Quebec. Again, foreigners coming in, and the drive by New York State was to teach them American history, to teach them the English language, to teach them to fit in. And that's what the normal schools in Potsdam, in Plattsburgh, and elsewhere, that's what their job was to do. And so what you have is a very impressive Romanesque building here, which, as you know, again, was at the top of the hill, commanding the view. And so what you have here, the streets have changed, but here we've got again, here's Soma Linda, there's Ebenezer Winslow, and here you've got, again, Prospect Heights there. What you've got was I'm not sure why it was ever called Young Street. I went to Special Collections, we were trying to figure out why it was called Young Street, but this is gonna be Prospect, okay, so it will be changed. And you can see the streets coming up, Brinkerhoff coming up. So what we have back in the 1899 bird's eye map is again how Plattsburgh was pretty much, the normal school was on its own in this bucolic type of atmosphere there. Until the bucolic atmosphere ended when the boiler went bad. And so the 1929 fire is going to lead to this spectacular new building, twice the size. And it was again, Smithwee's family was one who pushed to get this rebuilt and pushed to reestablish it. So the college was out of the neighborhood for a couple of years, again holding classes elsewhere. But this is the building we have today, Hawkins Hall as it's now called. And it looks like a fortress. It looks like a fortress in kind of an English Catholic style. So this is Jacobean in architecture, essentially. And you think of how it would appeal partly to the newcomers to town. Catholic, again, and representative of this English tradition. So Hawkins Hall, as we call it today, is again very stately edifice that has fortunately been treated well by the university, better than the building which I have occupied for the years. Okay. The building I occupy, I'll get into in a minute, but right down the street is Champlain Valley Hospital. Anybody born there? A few of you, okay. So you might remember this is a Dutch building. I don't know how a Dutch building fit into Plattsburgh, but you got this curvilinear parapet up here. Again, lines and curves. Again, this tan brick really stood out from the red brick which we have mostly up here. But it was again run by the Grey Nuns out of Canada, and it was again efficient in modern Ford's era, and it grew and grew and grew. So here you see that original building, and so there's a wing established here, a big back wing established here, and then the nursing school, which was established over here. This front is Georgian Revival. It's from 1926, 1927, and the back wing was built during World War II in 1944. So this whole complex was, again, gigantic, but it was competing, it's redundant because William Minor built the physician's hospital right down the street. So the two hospitals really couldn't survive, couldn't coexist. And so the hospital was losing its ground, and that's when the state bought out the land. Big area of land, as you can see right there. Now, think of how this building is going to, well, I'll show it since I show it. What survives is here, the nursing school from 1926, and this was the proud home of the history department. English, okay, English department, modern languages and so forth, okay. And this is the hospital which went down in 1978, okay. The back wing survived for long years. It finally was torn down in 2009. You can see that there. I used to walk by there with my kids and take them to daycare. We kind of explore the inside of the building. You go in the back, the operating table is still there with the kind of hospital paraphernalia around it. When they tore it down, again, they were digging on the parking lot and they dug trenches for electrical lines. And I found all these bottles from the old era. One bottle, I hate to say it, but I saw money in it, and I made $100 selling it. Okay. So it was to my fortune, I suppose. But what you have is this modern building, again, this back wing, finally biting the dust, and is now this parking lot. Okay. Now, besides the late 19th century buildings, we've got hotels. Plattsburgh had plenty of hotels because it was, again, the main route up on train from Montreal to New York by car, US 9. The US highway system was established in 1916, but then the DH had come to before that. And so these hotels, again, they don't survive. And so some of you probably remember the Witherell, okay, it's torn down for a bank, okay, it precedes my era here. Even the Hotel Cumberland, which has gone through a couple iterations, originally wood and then rebuilt, reclad, shown here from the 1930s. So these hotels, this hotel here, the Cumberland, is now the empty parking lot right across from Cornerstone Books. And you think how tiny that parking lot is, but they were able to squeeze what is a 4 or 5 ranked building into that lot right there. And right next door, sorry, right next door is what you got is the county courthouse. So hotels, again, gone. Now, commercial structures. On Katy Corner, there was a beautiful Victorian building. It went up in fire, okay? And so sometimes these buildings just are hard to save because the fire department just can't get there quick enough or they're too combustible with material. But Katy Corner went, and you can see when the fire came, it took more than the building with it because it was replaced by this Renaissance structure, the First National Bank from 1923. And here you can see the sign going down to Albany, so you go around town. But here, on both sides of it, you can see is where Albert Marshall and his family built, again, commercial structures. You know, Marshall's hardware, he sold again, automobile equipment. He even sold cars. Somehow he got cars up to the back floor, the top floor of this back building, and had kind of a showroom up there for cars in the 1920s. So what we're going to see is that downtown is going to change because of these fires, and new structures come in, sometimes stylish like this, other times less than appealing. Now I want to go into some of the industrial structures because Plattsburgh, remember, was a powerhouse when it came to industry at one time. And so here we're going to look at Bridge Street, okay? Now here are the trolleys coming down Bridge, so look at this building here, okay? That is Pat Mendelsohn, okay? Established in 1893, North Plattsburgh Brewing Company. And they had good taste back in those days too because they were producing ales and porters. But they also recognized people like light beers, so they also sold Budweiser and Pabst. And they also sold over 1 million cigars in a year. So this building is going to survive. We're going to see it go through various iterations in days to come. So this is, as I say, the northeast corner, and the river is right down here. Here you can see the 1873, again, Iron Bridge. So we want to watch this building here, okay, and see what happens to it. Now, one thing about this building which is going to create problems, okay, here is Pat Mendelsohn and this whole building. Now what you see here underneath is a covered flume. It's a waterway under a subterranean waterway. And that water is going to be used to power various machines because there's grist mills here for flour, there's wood cutting machines for Purdue's carpentry shop right next door. There's other types of motive devices that use power. Okay, so that's going to be an issue right there. You can see there's a little mill pond here. The water would come through. It would race through. It would come out here. It would come out here. It would come out further into the Saranac River. Now, this type of, again, underground structure, I think is going to create subterranean problems with the buildings. We're going to see how that's going to play out there. But I'm talking about right now, again, Pat Mendelsohn Brewery, okay? That's going to become Ginsberg's Furniture here. I'm not sure if people remember that. It's going to last up into the 60s, okay? So Ginsberg's Furniture, a very stately commercial building. You know, very nice arcaded windows along the front. Big, again, windows for all the lighting for the showrooms. Okay, very nice cornice line, very nice coin line, very nice foundation. That finger, sorry. Very nice foundation. Where are we? Okay. So Ginsberg Furniture, very stately building, and I guess it prospered long enough to survive into the decades after World War II. All right. Now, here's where, again, I go back to the bird's eye to tell you what's going on, because what you have going on is, go back here, we've got the Iron Bridge from 1873. Here we've got Pat Mendelsohn, as I just mentioned. Here you've got the dam. Now, the dam is going to force water into these races. Here's a race going into this textile mill here. The water's going to come all the way through and come out here. Now, it doesn't show the east side, but there's going to be races along here, so the water's coming through. Now, this dam is obviously going to be an environmental problem when it comes to salmon. You know, some northern towns removed their dams. Fortunately, Plattsburgh did. Go to Swanton today. Their dam is still damming up the river. And And so the salmon still have problems getting up and down, again, to again breathe. So what we have here is the river is not only the motive force, but it's also one that is an environmental issue in the years to come. Now, here's Plattsburgh Brewery, as I mentioned. Here's the building here, Pat Mendelson. And here is the carpentry shop. Now, if we fast forward to today, or actually 1990 when I took this photo, the brewery is gone. It's a parking lot. But this building survives. This is the same building here. So this is the old carpentry shop, and it's an apartment house today. And so people, again, have adapted to riverside living. And I would think that some of these actually are very nice apartments with this very scenic site along the Saranac. Okay. Further down the street, okay, you got Plattsburgh Milling Company. It's part of an associated group called Miller Flour Mills. Now the problem with flour mills is that if you think of the 1890s, first years 1900s, Pillsbury, General Mills are getting to become monopolies. They are growing, growing, growing. In New York State, the mills are Buffalo. In fact, a few years ago, there was a major controversy over one of the silos that was still left in Buffalo, how to preserve it. So this company is going to have a hard time adapting. As you can see, it incorporated, and then 6 years later, it declared bankruptcy. Now, this is the building that I'm referring to. Okay, so here's this office, and here's, again, the grist mill. Here's a building. The D&H Railroad's coming up by. The building is too important to let go, so what happens is a paper mill and bag company comes in. It doesn't last long either, because Ticonderoga Mill comes in, makes paper bags. Union Camp makes paper bags. More and more big companies are coming in, and Plattsburgh firms have a hard time competing against those. But what you see here is that the building is still here, the building is there, and here's the race, and so we've got these structures that are going to last longer than the firms themselves. Now, part of the building still survives, so it may not be sightly, but it's here. So this is what archaeologists would say, well, look and see what we've got left over. So you walk down Green Street, okay, you can see this is part of the old grist mill, the paper bag company. It's fronted by a 1930s structure. I'm not sure what this was, but it sure looks a lot like a showroom for cars back in those days. Big front windows and so forth. I was trying to figure out which car company. I started ruling them out, but it was, again, a 1930s into 40s commercial structure associated with that. Now, right across the street, very interesting story too. You got the Hagee Institute. This is a Norton block. It goes back to the 1880s. And here is a picture from the 1890s. And what you got in front of it is the old iron bridge. It was built in 1873. Now, the Hagee Institute was a physical medicinal treatment of alcoholism and morphinism, all the opiates, Coca-Cola and things like that. And so you think of, again, the problems associated with all these legal drugs for the day. Well, the Hagee Institute lasted until the first years of the 20th century. Okay, here it is. Let's see here. There it is, okay. See a nice big monitor, a cupola up on top, very nice cornice line. Right there, it turns into the same building, becomes Isaac Merkel's, liquor business. Okay, wholesale liquor and rectifiers. Okay, this is where you take grain alcohol and you add flavors to it for your cordials and so forth. So the irony, if you get it, is here they're trying to treat alcoholism, okay, and here they're, okay, so this is the problem our society faces, we got these mixed symbols. But this building, again, very nice, very stately, you got the stone bridge coming through in the 1930s, very, again, solid landmark, very nice, again, you think of the window treatment here, again, these hoods, again, round arched hoods over all the windows. Look at the corbel line. The brick mason who did this did a wonderful job. These are just layers of bricks. In the trade we call them teardrop. They look like teardrops coming down. So a teardrop type of corbel line there. Okay. So a building like this is one that we would like to see survive, okay? Well, Ginsburg survives, here it is, in 1968-69. But what happened to the Norton block? It was decapitated. The third floor, and again, the cupola were removed. You can still see, again, the window treatment here, these hoods above the windows. So this is what happens often as buildings go through changes where you barely recognize them after the surgery. And so this building still survives today. So if you go down, again, along Bridge Street, you can still see the building today. The gas station, the Shell gas station, Shell, Gas and Go, I forget the name of the station was it recently.
Highway gas.
What's it?
Is it highway?
Highway gas. You know, it's the budget gas that I could afford, I suppose, but that's it, okay? Across the street, again, Bridge, we're still on the west side. Again, many of, again, very attractive Victorian blocks, these are gone. They were replaced subsequently by other, again, residential structures, or other commercial structures. Across the street, you've got this maze, this warren of development. So much industry, again, small business, as well as larger businesses were occupied from Bridge Street all the way down to Broad Street. This is River Street in the back, South River Street, which they became Durkee. But you can see everything from, what's it say, a billiard hall to, let's see, I'll get my finger in here, right? Where am I going? I'm caught. Okay. Everything from billiard hall to, again, Pal Blade moved into there and so forth. And so this is what we're going to see in Frank Arvey's dream, which became in some ways a nightmare for many in the community, what to do with this block here. Now, when you think about workers, they had to live somewhere, and so I just chose two of the buildings I've been taking pictures of. This one on Gough Street. Gough Street is, again, right here off Catherine Street. Very simple, square, cube block, again, a worker's home from the late 19th century, demolished, okay? This one, again, I like this one. It was a duplex, and it was built, it's got a boom town front, you know, like they have out in the Western movies and so forth, just to make it seem bigger. This is gone, is replaced by a parking lot, okay? So a lot of workers' housing have become just again, profitable, and so they haven't maintained. If you go back to Water Street or River Street or South Durkee, whatever you want to call it, we can see in insurance maps of the era, tenements, all up and down there. So workers lived near their factories, near their place of employment. They lived there just for the proximity of the job. Now, to contrast with the workers, what you have at the same time, more well-to-do people are choosing a neoclassic style. So it's not only, again, the Presbyterian Church, which became Masonic Hall here on Oak Street. It's also, again, how Masonic Hall upped its ambitions, built a very tall, three-story, again, gigantic monumental portico here next to the Strand Theater. So this is, again, right on Oak Street. But you can see how this area is going to be developing. And so that's how Plattsburgh is again, showing its income. One of the nicest neoclassic structures was owned by Lieutenant Governor Thomas Conway. He's one of the few people who at the time owned a Lozier car, too. Loziers. When a Cadillac cost $550, the cheapest Lozier was something like $6,000, $7,000. Okay? So he had his hand in obviously wealth. But his house was palatial. It was, again, a beautiful neoclassic. This gigantic porch, again, a wraparound porch. Here we are facing the east, so shaded awning windows. Look at this cornice line all the way across, monumental columns, very steep roof. Even again, a tower up top, so you could see the again lakeside. Here's how the house fit into the countryside. So here's Broad Street, here's Ruger Street. His lot went all the way back to the Saranac River. A big piece of land. Now, this piece of land is going to be obviously too difficult to maintain, so it's sold off. First, Plattsburgh State buys it, it becomes Conway Hall. For a short time, it was a dormitory. And then it was demolished and became a space for, as we now know, McDonough Hall. McDonough Hall, it looks nice from that era, but it's again, it takes up a lot of real estate, up and down. Harrington Hall is right next door here to it. So the Conway land kind of spread across this, and so the college is just moving in. This is 49, so this is when it's again, still the normal school. Plattsburgh State Teachers College is there to be renamed it. Okay? Rivaling the neoclassic of the era were Queen Anne's. And we have some left in town, and I just chose a few pictures where they are incidental to what you see. This is a Queen Anne, you can see with this big conical tower, big, wide, spacious porch, built for large families, modern conveniences like indoor plumbing, like gas, heating and oil burners. Here's another Queen Anne, again with a big
Since
tower.
mobile data is turned off, you'll have to connect to a Wi-Fi.
Okay, and I'm not connected to a Wi-Fi, so I guess I will go on. But sometimes the Queen Anne's don't have towers, so they're towerless, as you can see here. These are both on Court. This is on Court Street. This was a house, again, which was demolished for college expansion on Beekman. Again, Hudson Hall, I think, is the one that took this one down. Taken down also by fire. Obviously the theaters, the Weed Theater, Plastic Theater was a multi-purpose building. Again, the upper floor had, again, a theater which would sit 1,000 people in it. Bigger than Hawkins Hall, bigger than the Strand, okay? Down below, you got, this was village offices. Plattsburgh became a city at the turn of the century, so you had village and city offices. You had professional offices there too. And so it was a very stately building, but when this caught fire next door, the fire spread to here, and both buildings went down in the flames. And what does this graffiti say? It's written by an insurance agent, reminding people to make sure they have insurance for their fire. So
Where was that?
it's what?
Where was that?
This is Marion Street here, okay, and so this is Clinton Street back in here.
Oh.
So, you know, where again the Presbyterian Church is right here, and then you go, this is Marion, the Merchants National Bank is right here. So this is again, it's irreplaceable. You know, look, it's 5 stories tall, and it was the pride of town. Shows from Montreal would come down to play here because the theater was so acoustically great, and so it was wonderful for the era. Neoclassicism also, again, as I mentioned before, sometimes location is so important because what you have is, this is where, again, that Jeffersonian classicism building was, okay, and the location is, again, here's Brinkerhoff here, right here, and here's Oak Street. Loyal Smith, again, wanted to add a social reform to the city. Loyal Smith was one of our prominent philanthropists. He helped fund City Hall and so forth. And so he largely bought the land and helped pay for most of the YMCA, which was in a modest building on Margaret Street before this. Very different type of YMCA. You think of today, back then, people were interested in books and contemplation and quiet talk and so forth. And what did the YMCA become? It became a sports center, okay? And so all the physical activities associated with the YMCA today are dominant. So this is how an institution like the Y can also change over the years. The modernized building, as you can see, you can still see pieces of it. Here again, it's the cornice running along the back. Again, the roof line. You can see the winged cornices above these windows. You go around to the front and you've got a very different type of building there. Okay, and neoclassicism too, again, the Masonic Hall was again revised for the synagogue, and the synagogue again shown here, neoclassic, again the columns, again the steep gable with an entablature, so we've got again formal forms there. And then we got the library system. Again, it looks like a cute building, but it doesn't have any type of aesthetic architectural taste to it. That shows, you know, my sense of what should be considered in a building. Georgian Revival, again, academic classicism. My building at SUNY, CVH, again, is Georgian Revival. The public library was remodeled from the old academy there, so parts of the academy are buried within that building there too. Again, Georgian revival of the era built by the WPA, opened in 1940. And here's the Y across the street, and here is what it looks like. So a pavilion, with the pavilion coming out. Center rank is where all the decoration is. And we know that building's going to be changed also because here we've got the modernization. Now, if you have to watch your budget first, then you make these choices. Because the building fit the needs of the library for the day, but what kind of an impression does it leave on other people who go by and see what is, again, an alien block built there? So it's a judgment call, and unfortunately budgetary concerns seem to be the ones driving many of these renovations there. Same thing, here we've got remember the Home for the Friendless, the federal building? It was replaced by, again, very stylish high school. This is Beaux-Arts. Beaux-Arts, you've got these columns, recessed columns, again, big volutes, these scrolls up top. Second floor is the prominent, second, third floor are the prominent. So this is all Beaux-Arts construction, flat roof, topped by a balustrade, very modest entrance on the first floor. Very nice building, but it just would be one where the needs of this community outgrew its importance there. And so this is going to be demolished in 1974, as you can see, because the land is going to be used for the middle school. And the middle school has turned into a gigantic complex. If you walk behind it, it is so big compared to what it started at, but that's the way Plattsburgh had developed. Again, denominational schools also important. Jacobean, if you know your English history, the James II, again, was Catholic. And so the Catholics of the United States looked to him as an inspiration. I went to grade school and high school in a very similar looking Jacobean building. Okay, Bonnie Prince Charlie, again, Catholic. He's going to be he's going to be the grandson of again, James II. So the Catholics chose the Jacobean form. Now the French Canadians chose neoclassic of a different order. Now this building is where the current, I guess it's a football field, a soccer field, where Elm Street and Catherine come together, and this is an empty space. And so this, again, came down when the Catholic schools started merging. And why did they merge? Because of numbers. They had to pool the resources, and so we see the Catholic schools pretty much lining up. But this building, for its day, very stylish. Look at the coins in the corner. Very stylish, again, columns on the second floor entry. Real nice pediment and tablature going across here. Very nice building for its era, but this is all history. Now the biggest demolition in town was River Street. And I did a program for again, County Historical on this demolition too, so I won't go into it too much except to say, let me just follow the cursor, okay? So here's Trinity Church, so everything's, follow my cursor, everything here is going to be demolished. This whole area is going to bite the dust. And this is going to be replaced by, I think, a wonderful asset in Plattsburgh now, City Hall and McDonough Monument. So sometimes demolition is for the better, but some people suffer as a result. So what was lost was, again, Courthouse Park is now, Trinity Park changed, okay? And so the building's there. Here's a livery stable. Horses were giving way to automobiles. Here's another livery stable. There's another livery stable right around the corner. Residential structures in between, excuse me again. Residential structures in between. So this is all going to be one to be revised. Now, the first Catholic church in town also bit the dust. You can see what happened to it once St. Peter's was built. St. Peter's was started in 1853, and during the 50s it developed. Once St. Peter's developed, the French Canadians moved out, and the Irish Catholics began to build St. John's, and so that's during the 1860s. And so what you have is this street, this church is unwanted, becomes a storefront. So very typical of the era. This is going to be demolished. The Palace Theater, at this time, there were something like 6, 7, 8 different theaters downtown, okay? So this one was vaudeville, it was again a slow motion picture and so forth. It was again felt of fire. This is the side of the McDonough Monument, go on. Plattsburgh Steam Laundry, big operation. And it was one that was compensated fairly by the city, while other businesses, small businesses particularly, lost out when the city took the property through eminent domain. That's the whole thing about eminent domain. Some people win, others lose. Depends how much political power is involved there. Now what developed is again what we see. Okay, so Smithweed had his own park on the river, and this became part of a municipal plan. So here's see where here's the Kent Lord, here's Smithweed's house right here, here's City Hall, and so this picture here is approximately this area here. We still have difficult terrain here. If you ever tried to walk on these woods, it's not traversable. But it's pretty, and what's most pretty is again the juxtaposition of John Russell Pope's City Hall and McDonough Monument. Beautiful piece of classic, neoclassic architecture and terrain. And so this is again a plan the city's developing, still developing today with the river project. So it's a plan long in the making. Now, just closing, I want to show the industrial complexes. Williams Manufacturing, Williams here, again, it's going to fall right after this photo was taken, in the late 60s, early 70s. It's where the police department is now. But Williams Manufacturing, again, Andrew Williams came down from Canada. He thought he could enter the U.S. market. He wanted to sell typewriters, sewing machines, and bicycles. Okay, let's go over these. Sewing machines. Who's going to become the dominant sewing machine manufacturer in the United States? Singer. By the turn of the century, Singer's got 70% of the market. Okay? Now, typewriters. You think about this. There's a little more difference. Royal typewriter is a strong competitor. Now, bicycles, you know, a lot of companies make those. Could he swim? Okay. But he just had trouble again making money doing this. And that was the problem, and that's going to be the fate of Williams Manufacturing. Big building, big financial losses. Now, right across the river, or actually right down the street from the river, is the Plattsburgh Shirt Company. Now, as you can see here, they made a lot of shirts. This is a Troy corporation. Troy was the dominant textile town in New York State. And this company and United Shirt was also from Troy. And this company here had something like 7 different, again, factories. One was down even in Keysville. You see all the young women here lined up, but this is a time when these young women maybe made $4 a week times $50, $200 a year. And this is the time when Sinclair Lewis was thinking about the Gilded Age, the disproportionate accumulation of wealth by some, and the fact that others were troubled. And so what you have is, again, Plattsburgh had the advantage of a lot of cheap labor. These are women who came across the border, or women who came in from foreign countries, and that was Plattsburgh's principal draw for these companies, is that the labor market was the corporation's control. Now here's the United Shirt, same issue, cheap labor. Now what you can see here is the dam, the mill race, okay, powered it, and it comes under, the race goes all the way through past the Iron Bridge, and it comes out the other side of Bridge Street. Across the street from, again, Williams Manufacturing is the power plant. Now, we all are pretty familiar with the after effect of this power plant, because this is Light, Heat, and Power Company. This is the photo from 1897. As you can see from the script above, it started in 96 and lasted till 44, taken over by NYSEG, which lasted till 1960. Now, what did the power plant do? They brought in coal, and they made that coal into coal gas, or they sometimes call it town gas. Now, today we're used to natural gas, but the after effect of this process, you see the belching smoke come out, the after effect was all these coal tars. So what did they do with the coal tar? They dumped them right, I'm going to show the green. They dumped them in this land here, okay, which became this land here. So NYSEG went through, there were 7 different sites in New York, totaling $17 million. They wouldn't tell me how much this one site cost, but this was what we have today. So we've got this gigantic expanse of land. What is going to be done with it? Your guess is as good as mine. My wife and I walked by there last night. It's a big open span, but who knows what's going to happen with it.
Are they done?
They're done with the remediation, that's right. So they're still, again, waiting for nature
Jim,
to somehow
the plan
solve
is
the
to
problem.
do sports fields there.
So it's gonna be a sports field, well, as long as they don't stay too long, I think. All right. Okay, the urban renewal, I'm gonna talk about this more when I do my PowerPoint on, again, the Combe Street District, but just to give you a quick review of it, here's Durkee Street, you can see coming down, it's called South River Street. Here are all these different small and large companies alike, and urban renewal program comes in, and you can see the bulldozer here beginning its work. Now this is going to be federally funded. So in the 60s and 70s, there's 3.3 million, which in today's dollars is almost $20 million. And so the area was, again, Bridge Street, here's the bridge, here's the river, Bridge Street, down Durkee, all the way to Broad Street. There was no bridge yet at Broad Street when this was envisioned, that would be coming up later, but this whole expanse of land would be up for grabs. Other factories also met their maker. So if you follow just this one building, which is archaeologically interesting, the sloped walls of Titan Foundry from the 1870s, Lozier got it and made power boats there. This is a so-called boat house over there. But after that, again, a paper manufacturer, Diamond Match came in, Vandy Fair came in, and now Georgia Pacific. So a range of companies coming in. This is a zero, see, this is the zeros, this is the 40s, 50s, into the 60s and 70s in our own time. All this has to do with, again, this one building there. Now, just to give a lighter side, there's the County Fair building. As you know, the county fairgrounds used to be in the west side of town, again, out by, further out than Hawkins Hall. It was moved to where Bailey and Boynton come together. And this area is going to be then come, again, Melissa Penfield Park. The Home for the Friendless is going to be right near here too, so that's going to change. Entertainment, also mass culture. Wonderland Theater was very popular here. Here's the river, as I said. Plattsburgh Theater, again in the Weed Building, seated 1,000 people, gigantic venue. What you also have, and some of you folks might remember this, this all precedes me. One time when I was chair of the department, I brought Chester Leeds from UVM to teach a one-semester course for our McClellan grant, and he did pop culture, roadside culture. Well, this is a good example of roadside culture. Orange Julep, which is not Orange Julius. Orange Julep was a Montreal company. Montreal, again, operation. Sold 18-cent hamburgers too, and was there at Cumberland Corners for years. So was, again, the Astrodome. And so, when you think about what's part of Plattsburgh's memory, well, this is, for a lot of people, what they remember before McDonald's came in and dominated the scene. Now, just to close, I'm going to go quick of lost parts of Plattsburgh. I love this postcard of Court Street, because if you contrast it with today, you're just saying, what happened to our trees? What happened to the maintenance of these Queen Anne neoclassic houses? It's all, again, a story to tell. My own street, my wife and I lived on Grace Avenue for over 30-some years. Again, the ice storm couldn't stop it. It did the job on the street, and it will never be essentially the same. Campus neighborhoods, those folks who grew up, were you on Beekman Street?
Yes.
On Beekman Street, okay. So when you think of the neighborhood here, let me just get my pointer out. Here's Champlain Valley Hospital, okay. Here's Park, coming down, Park Avenue. Here's, again, Normal or College Avenue, okay. Let's see, here's, sorry about that. Well, you can see from the map where what's coming through, Beekman and so forth. And so this whole area is going to be taken by the state through eminent domain to, again, allow for the expansion of Plattsburgh Teachers College, Plattsburgh University College, and ultimately soon Plattsburgh itself. Bridges have changed. You know, architecturally and structurally, this bridge, which was built in 1873, was extremely interesting. It's a tubular bridge, tubes, okay? But the problem with it is that as it went down the street, okay, the bridge stopped, but the roadway began to collapse. And I think it's because of the flumes. The water, again, subterranean damage. And so here's the grist mill, the paper mill, and they're looking at these guys who were buried in the collapse there. So what that's going to lead to is, again, well, it's going to lead to, Okay, it's going to lead to, again, questioning about the bridges safety. Saranac Street Bridge also is unique. It was a worn pony truss. If you go walking along the nice remediation site, right by the police department, you're going to see a nice little interpretive exhibit there, and it's explaining why this Saranac Street Bridge was so important. There used to be a pedestrian bridge coming from south, again, River Street, across to Saranac Street, and then this bridge coming from Saranac Street over to Pine Street. And so the workers could get to their factories, so the workers could get to their jobs. This one, we walked across this one, but it was closed to cars by the time I got here, but again, it's structurally very significant. The river has changed, obviously, and so the dam is here. Again, the iron bridge there, the race is here. Here's a new bridge went in 1930, the dam is still there. All this is going to be changing. What's also lost are the rivers, and the islands on the rivers. So, 1, 2, 3 islands there. And as, again, the city's tried to deal with its waste, and again, its effluent and so forth, this is where the municipal water treatment plant will be built. And it was built there because it's gravity-driven, the lowest point in town, and that's what the federal government paid for. And so these rivers were taken by that. I don't know what happened to what I call City Island, but this is where the Broad Street Bridge is going to come through, and I kind of think that this was part of it moved into build the foundation for that bridge right there. So the islands within the city changed. The rail yard, I don't know if anybody misses the rail yard. I don't, because if you've been to Albany or you've been to Burlington, you see the rail yards right in the middle of the commercial section. And can you imagine all these oil cars, again, the Bakken oil sitting so close to our residential area? It gives me the shivers. And so I think it's great that the city moved, or again, the state moved it down to South Acres, so the rail yard is no more. Fires, again, can be prevented, but they are repeated. Fires are sometimes localized. Again, here American Legion had this building, the Smith Mead House. The kitchen fire caused this. Fortunately, the building was restored in a nice, sensitive fashion. Thanksgiving turkey almost took down the Andrew Williams house. Again, this is on Macomb Street. Very nice, but much modified Second Empire building. Still there, again, added onto endlessly, it seems, but it's still there. Even the place, again, where Marion and again Clinton Street come together. This is the old Republican newspaper building. It's been, again, restored. Here's the Presbyterian Church right here, okay. What I'm going to be talking about next is the Macomb Street District, and that's the urban renewal plan that the city fostered back in the 1970s. Neoclassic houses, again, this became, again, much used by doctors, by college professors. Eventually college students got it, and the landlord just didn't maintain it during this college student's absence, and the fire resulted. Lastly, even a house like Jean Arthur's up on Oak Street. It's a modest house, not well maintained. It can be burned. Though we may put a mural up to honor Plattsburgh's legacy, the house itself deserves a better care. So I want to close by just going back to the guy who started all this, Alan Everest. Okay, Our North Country Heritage is a classic book on our area, in these 3 counties, okay? 2 counties, Clinton and Essex. Alan, as you can see, he lived to be 80 years old, taught at Plattsburgh State for almost 40 years, okay, retired in '83. His obituary in the American Historical Review kind of credits him for leading so much when it comes to local history and, quote, the urgent necessity of preserving its architectural heritage. Right? He was a founder of the CCHA, served on its board, edited the quarterly publication, The Antiquarian, and he's the one who pushed the creation of special collections, which is an invaluable resource over at SUNY Plattsburgh. I want to close with a very harsh comment that, again, Alan made, because he was writing when these buildings, these mansions were coming down to build tasteless apartments. The rape of Broad Street, which is a strong term. The rape of Broad Street goes on at an accelerating pace. Over the years, it has doomed dozens of colonial homes, mansard mansions, and more ordinary structures, and there is no end in sight. Now, urban renewal is getting in the act by condemning additional buildings, including the famous early Sperry's Tavern. Broad Street would be a horrible example, even if it stood alone. Unfortunately, the developers are busy throughout the city. There is apparently no effective control over the size and style of new buildings, or the uses to which they can be put. Plattsburgh's rich architectural and historic heritage is in danger of yielding completely to the renovators and the bulldozers unless more purposeful city planning is undertaken soon. A word of warning which is again still relevant today. On a comical note, I don't know if you've ever read The New Yorker. Charles Adams was a wonderful cartoonist. He wrote over 1,000 cartoons for The New Yorker. And here's one where he shows a developer, okay, throwing the last rock on the window of this beautiful Victorian structure as this tasteless structure is going up next door. Even kids nowadays, okay, the Berenstain Bears, my kids read these books and I read them to them. What it says is, again, be a wrecker and wreck things with your wrecking ball, destroying what looks like a nice, tasteful Victorian structure. So we need to, again, see this past in a perspective where caution and respect are warranted, and think about how the next generation and generations after that are going to care for your heritage and my heritage. Okay? That's the easiest page for me to I just want to say, I'm not a historian of Plattsburgh like Alan was. All of Alan's research and publications were on Plattsburgh. I write about historic preservation nationally, so this is what I've done, and so I'm really, again, following Alan's footsteps about trying to refocus on local Plattsburgh and Clinton County. So, questions and answers.
Can I make a plug? We have some copies of Alan Everest's book in the shop downstairs.
Oh, do you?
Some used copies at good prices if
Good
anybody's
prices.
interested.
I made the mistake when I retired of selling so much of my collection. And now I'm borrowing it from Feinberg Library. Okay, so
Alan was my teacher at Plattsburgh State in 73.
was he really?
Yes, he was.
He was
Very nice man.
A very nice gentleman.
Yes.
And he was soft-spoken, but he,
Very,
as that last quotation, he was serious.
A quick reminder, as always, views expressed are those of the participants who do not necessarily represent the views of Hometown Cable or any cable system that this might be showing on. So views are expressed, as always, are those of the participants. Thanks for watching.